Okay, welcome back to another tutorial course. So this is called CSS Basics. Now CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. So a style sheet is something that we apply to our HTML. If you haven't learned HTML yet, I encourage you to look in my own YouTube channel. There's an HTML5 Basics course that you can use to learn the basics of HTML, where you create a real one-page website at the end of it, and then what we learn in the CSS Basics course we're going to use to apply styles and layout to that basic HTML site, so that we're going to wind up in the end with a working website that's going to look nice, and you'll be able to mess around with some of the styles and the layout of it as well. So let's dig into what is CSS, number one. So we have already gone over the fact that this is HTML. Now HTML is like the, if we go back to our body diagram, the HTML is like the bones. It gives the structure and the real physicality to your body. CSS is more like the skin, the hair, the way that the skin falls on and it's on your bones. I don't know exactly the best way, but it's more like what you see. It's the visible parts that when everyone looks, they see your nose, they see your eyes, they see these things that are on top of your skeleton. And then the last part of the modern web is JavaScript, and JavaScript is an interaction language, and so that's more like the muscles, the things that actually make all of those parts and pieces begin to move around and animate. So CSS is more like our skin, and in some ways it's the tendons and the attachments. So we're going to create those attachments, and then the muscles are actually going to move all of those pieces around based on the kinds of connections that we can make with cascading style sheets using classes and IDs, and then manipulating those elements. So let's get into the basics. The basic thing of any language is the syntax. You know, how do we write it, essentially? So we have our body element here, and then inside it we have this h1 tag, which is a heading 1, and that is hello world. And then we also have a paragraph here that says this is my first CSS example. So let's come down here and we will look at our CSS. So this is the general syntax for what we call a CSS rule. So each thing that has a selector and the curly brackets, everything inside here is called a rule, a CSS rule. Now we start with some selector. Now the selectors correspond to these document nodes, what we call the nodes. So the different the parts of the HTML markup. So not the actual text inside, but what did we surround the text with. So a node can be the body, it can be HTML, which comes outside and encircles the body. We don't have to do that with CodePen, but you would if you were just using a regular text editor. So H1, any heading tag, it can be a selector. Any paragraph can be a selector. Image tags, those are the sorts of things that we've worked with. Unordered list tags, the list item tags, all of the things that we used in order to mark up and to create our previous HTML5 website can be used as a selector, and I'll show you how that works in just a moment. So we do a selector. I'll just write it out here. This is how it will work. So selector, and then you do the curly braces. So not the straight braces, but the curly braces. And then you can begin to write. You can write it like this if you want to, but it's more difficult to read. So then we have a property, and then a colon, and then some sort of value, and then a semicolon. We usually put a space there so that we can see things very clearly. Now you can write this. This is exactly the same as this, They're both the same. But normally, if you start to put a bunch of these property value pairs together, it gets super long and it begins to be very difficult to read. So for scannability purposes, we usually write right off the bat, we'll write our selector, and then we do the curly braces, and then we create a space. Now in CodePen it creates this space and these indentations and things for us, which is a really nice thing for it because it makes writing your code faster. But otherwise you'll have to put in some of those spaces and indentations for yourself. So then we can write our property, space, and then a value, and then a semicolon. Now you can have many of these properties. Some of these go on for very long. You'll have very long property value pairs. Each of these property value pairs is called a CSS declaration. A CSS declaration. Now, all of the property value pairs together is called a declaration block. So it looks like a block, right? So that's it's a declaration block. So we have a selector, we have a property, we have a value, and then we have a declaration, and then we have a declaration block. Okay. Now when we're looking at these are comments. So most coding languages you're able to add comments in there. And you can see that none of these things are being displayed, right? So CSS rule is not being displayed. It's not up here. It only exists in the CSS, and this is just a place for you to write what you did, or what this means, or what this is attached to, or what it changes, those types of things, so that when another developer comes in after you, they'll be able to see, or yourself, sometimes it's important for yourself to see it, you can see what happened, what was I trying to do, what part does this style, maybe you can give me some directions on what's going on here in the code, because you can't always tell very quickly, and if you have these comments in there, it makes it a lot easier to find out where things went wrong or exactly what things are attached to what. So, okay, so let's actually do some styling of our HTML up here now that we understand this. Now you can see here already that this is not doing anything, right? Nothing is happening with our CSS, even though with our HTML, even though we have technically put some CSS in there. And one of the great parts about CSS, and kind of one of the difficult parts too, is that if the browser does not recognize some sort of selector or property value pair or value, if the value is bad, sometimes it'll return undefined, but if it just doesn't recognize it, it just won't print it out to the screen. So sometimes you can use these to manipulate how browsers how they do certain things with the HTML. So if you know that a browser is just going to skip over it, then you could put that first, and then after that, if you know there's something the browser won't skip over, then you can declare that CSS property. So it becomes kind of something you can manipulate to your own will and what you want to do, but sometimes it can be a little bit crazy, because if you've just mistyped something, then it's not going to print it out to the screen, and it's not going to attach it to the HTML. So it can be a little crazy to try to find what in the world went wrong. So you just have to go back and make sure that you're writing everything the correct way. Alright, so let's get in. First, we're going to look at the H1 tag. So we want to style this hello world right here. And there are so many, there are over 300 different types of properties, and then there are infinite numbers of values, because a lot of these values are going to be numeric values. So you can literally do anything in terms of numbers that would fit on the screen or that you want to do. So there are about 300 properties, and then there are as many selectors as you can create inside your HTML, and that becomes an infinite number as well whenever we start working with what are called IDs and classes. and I'll show you those in a little bit in another video. So let's take a look at the H1. So we just type H1, and then we have our curly braces. Let's put a space, and then one of the easiest things to change is the color. So if we want to change the color of the text itself, we use the color property, and then a colon, and then a space. And there are many, you can use a hexadecimal color. So you could use something like, let's say FF. This should give us red, and then we add our semicolon, and now we have our text is red. You can see our H1 text, we have styled it to be red. So if we get rid of this, so if we get rid of this and we comment it out, our text goes back to black. But if we have it back in, you can see that our text is going to turn to red. Okay, so now we have our red text. If you want to learn about colors, there are lots of different color pickers, lots of different things out there in the world. You can see here there's lots of different websites that you can go to. This is just the first one. It's called hexadecimal because there are 2, 4, 6. Hex is 6, right? Like a hexagon. And then a decimal is places. Okay, so there's 6 places, and then it starts with a pound sign or a number sign. It's not coming up very well. One of my favorite websites to go to is the Adobe Color website. So this is, if you're familiar with art or design, it's just a color wheel, but it's a color wheel from Adobe. They're the people who make Photoshop. And then inside this color wheel, you can see that it gives you a hexadecimal code. So as you manipulate and change things, it changes that code. Okay, so it's a fun tool to play with. You can play around. They give you different types of color schemes, so you can use complementary colors or monochrome. So if you're familiar with color theory, it's a really cool website that you can just make changes to all kinds of things. And then when you're ready to input it, you can input this hexadecimal code right here. We just copy it, and then we are able to paste it, and then it should change this to a dark red color. I don't know if you'll be able to see it or not. It's hard to see. Let's use something lighter. Use something more drastic, like blue. So we copy that, and then we paste that in, and now our color is the same blue. Okay, so there's with color, this is another one of those values that's going to be essentially an infinite number of values, because there are just 256 million colors that are available to you through the hexadecimal code. There are also what are they called? They're called HTML colors. There's also a list of actual colors that you can see here. So if we use goldenrod, they built this into CSS so that you can think about names as opposed to thinking about oh, I don't know, thinking about the hexadecimal colors. So I know that gold works. So when we use gold, then it pulls in the color gold. Okay, if we use the color sky blue, then it should pull in a sky blue color. Is that how it works? Yeah. Okay, so there are these word values that you can use, and they represent colors. So this is a really good website to go to. So it tells you all the different colors, it tells you the hexadecimal code, and it shows you what color it actually is. So you can see just lots and lots of different colors. Um, so if we go light sea green, then it should give us that color. Okay, you see that. So this is maybe a good one to be able to save this page. This is at w3schools.com. So when you're choosing colors, that's a good one. And you can use these colors, these values, in any of your property declarations that contain a color. So background, font colors, um, those are your main ones that you're going to use. So H1, and we've colored it green. And then if we go down, we can make a second rule, and this rule would apply to our paragraph tags. And so remember, we put our curly braces, make a space, and then let's color that one a different color. Again, we can use the text color, and let's just do this one here, just a regular blue. So if we type blue, then that's going to be, it's like the kind of blue that's the link color of the HTML, right? So that's the default blue. You could also use like maybe a gray. So this becomes a shorthand, and I'll tell you about the shorthand here real quickly because this is part of the syntax. So DDD is the same as DDD, DDD. This is the same color. You notice there's no change up here. And when there's a repeating element, so black is the same way. Black is just 6 zeros. That's black, pure black. And if we have repeating elements, we can actually write that as a shorthand with just 3. So especially if it's all the same, letter or number, then you can actually write that as 3 instead of 6. So it's a little bit of a shorthand. If you do 4, it's not going to work. If you do 2, it's not going to work. It has to be 3 because that's half of the 6. If you do 9, you get a little bit lighter shade of gray. But essentially this is the same as this. Okay, so it's the same color. There are lots of little shortcuts along the way, and I'll show you those. I'll try my best to show you those as we go along, but that's one of them with color. You can also do a background. And remember, I told you any of these nodes up here we can change. So we can actually change the body to be a different color. So for the body, and the body is what holds all of these elements together, we're going to make the body background, and then we'll use a colon. And then let's say we want the color to be, let's say red, and then we have to put our colon. And so we can style the entire body that holds all of our content inside. Remember, the body is holding all of this content inside of here, and we can style the entire body red. We could make that anything that we want. We can make it blue, we can make it orange, but this is how you would style the entire body with a background color. You can also do each individual element to be a background color. So for the H1 we could say a background of red, and then now this element gets in, because it's a block level element, we've talked about that before, it goes all the way across the page 100%, and it has its own line, it has its own space. So all of that color fills in that entire space. And then the P is also a block level element, and this should also change the color here. So if we do blue as the background of that, then you can see that we've styled, this is your entire P element, a paragraph. So it styles the entire element with a background, and you can see how that works even when it gets smaller. Okay. Alright, so that is the basics. Remember, this is a CSS rule. Each of these things that you want to affect is called a selector. We have curly braces, and then inside those curly braces we have a property and a value pair. Each of these is called a CSS declaration. So you have a property, and these are set properties through the CSS language, and there are about 300 or so, over 300 properties, and then there's an appropriate value that goes with that property. So for these color ones, there's an appropriate color value that we can use, and that's what goes with these particular color properties. And then all of our properties together represents a CSS declaration block, so a block of property value pairs. Okay, so that is the basics. If you have any questions, please leave them down in the comments below, and remember to keep going through this, and we are working our way through some of the basic CSS properties. We learned 2 this time, background and color, and that's text color or font color. And so we'll continue to move through and explore the box model and some other things in later videos. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.